Ontario, but was born in London, Ontario. And I am currently a grade 12 or 17-year-old student in Sarnia, Ontario. My dad is a commercial fisherman, and my mom is a high school and college level science teacher. And growing up in southwestern Ontario, surrounded by the Great Lakes, I've always had this deep appreciation for the environment, especially water, whether it's swimming on it, kayaking, having picnics with my cousins on our birthdays in the summer, or going fishing with my dad, or being able to ask my mom questions about the fish, or why does this ecosystem do that, and always having answers. I guess I've been heavily influenced by my environment and what I've grown up around. Another thing is I am very, very passionate about social justice and helping those around me and improving life for others. So throughout my journey in my life, I've always been involved either in my elementary school social justice club, founding my social justice club at my high school. I'm actually the chair of a charity in Sarnia that provides holiday gifts to homeless women and sexual assault survivors as well. And especially, I'm very active in environmental justice as well. So at my high school, last year, we hosted this campaign and a petition to ban the selling of bottled water at St. Pat's. My high school specifically, so that we could fight water privatization and stand in solidarity with women and girls around the world who have to walk for water, and for villages and communities in the global south that lose access to water due to water privatization. So I guess between understanding, especially growing up in this environment, and really always having water, I've learned that I can't take it for granted and I need to do what I can to support those. Absolutely. So I was 9 years old in my elementary school when our social justice club did a presentation on exactly what they do in raising awareness of different global injustices. So kind of pointing out things like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I remember feeling very angry that we have this wonderful life here, but there are people who are going without things that they need, or there are girls who can't go to school, or there are people without water, which means that they can't cook, they can't clean, they don't have quality health care because of that. And I think it was that sort of, this isn't just, and why is it this way? That really drove me to it. I've always been a very, very curious person. I was that little child that asked far too many questions, probably. And I think it was partially my curiosity, like, why is it this way? What can we do? How can we fix it? That actually helped drive it a lot. I think people were very surprised. I remember my fellow students immediately outcasted me, and I was the weird girl who already liked doing homework, loved to read in class, and loved learning. And then all of a sudden it's like, she's asking questions and she's concerned about people that don't even live with us. It was, I think, a very big shock and surprise. And my teachers were always, they're like, whoa, okay. And so they kind of seemed impressed and they appreciated the curiosity. Some could have been overwhelmed by it, but I guess slowly over time, I found friends, especially through science fair and the science community. That's actually how I got really involved into science, was through the local science fair. And so my projects have always been on environmental sustainability and protection. And grade 8, my project was actually on, it was called De-icer Distillery. And essentially I distilled a homemade road de-icer out of kitchen compost to help fight waste accumulation, while creating a road de-icer that is non-corrosive and environmentally friendly, which is a huge issue in Canada. So that way we can have safe roads, but also not harm our environment or vehicles or infrastructure. And with that project, I went to my very first candlelight science fair where I placed bronze, but there I also met some of my very best friends now to this day. And all of our projects were always social justice focused on helping others. One of them actually, he assisted me in founding our high school social justice club, and we talked every single day. And it was kind of through science fair where I was like, hey, science can be used as a method to bring about social justice. And it was it's been, especially on my journey traveling internationally, I've been able to see how different countries approach it and different mindsets and how it can really be used to improve life for others. And that's sort of where, if we get into my research on harmful algae blooms, my dad, I remember and I remember reading articles about this, that Lake Erie is no longer, he doesn't fish there. But he has friends who like to go recreational fishing, and also we have family up there who are not able to swim there or even drink water from the lake because of these giant harmful algae blooms. And I remember thinking, what do you mean we have giant green scums and we can't go and drink our water, and the Great Lakes are under attack? And so I've been very passionate about learning about the issue and why it happens and how eutrophication works and what cyanotoxins are. And so from there in grade 9, there was a science fair drought due to the pandemic, and they were all canceled. But in grade 10, I chose to do research to find a method to treat and prevent harmful algae blooms, as there are very few solutions to them. And most of them actually make the issue worse because they'll kill the algae, but then of course they decompose, and then you have mass areas of hypoxia and dead zones. And so I looked at the method through zooplankton biomanipulation, which I went to the virtual Candlelight Science Fair with and won silver. And I was so enthralled with the topic of limnology and learning about aquatic ecosystems and the chemical and biological and different aspects of how they all work and come together that I chose to continue my research. And that's how my project Plankton Wars was born, where I won the Best Project Award at the Candlelight Science Fair, got to represent Team Canada at the European Union Contest for Young Scientists, where I won third prize overall, and where I went to represent Canada at the Stockholm Junior Water Prize, which I won in August as well, which is the highest accolade in the world for youth water science. Absolutely. So my first project focused on discovering which species of zooplankton would be best to biomanipulate to treat and prevent harmful algae blooms. Now, zooplankton are teeny tiny aquatic organisms that actually mainly consume algae. And biomanipulation is when you manipulate an ecosystem to create a desired effect. So from that project, I researched which species of freshwater zooplankton would be best to biomanipulate so it can act like a Pac-Man and eat up all the algae. And from that project, with the species that I had found, I then went and tested at the genotypic level because I wanted to see if genotype or genetics played into a role to find out which genotype would be most successful. Because then what can happen is we can streamline the process to make sure that we're using the best genotype and most specific and accurate form of that species of zooplankton. And then, of course, because we know the Great Lakes are very dynamic and there are a variety of environmental factors that could help or hinder their success or the species' reaction to algae blooms, I tested the specific genotype that I found to be best under different environmental conditions, and of course, performed statistical analyses on all of my work. My greatest influence is my mother. She was always my, you can do anything. She was a woman in science. She was like one of the only female professors in her faculty at Lambton College for a while teaching. She always, when I was little, would perform, instead of like playtime or let's do make believe, she would bring in, we do mini kitchen experiments. And on occasions, there was like once or twice where we didn't have a babysitter or my dad was out working. So I sometimes went into her lectures. And so I was that little 3-year-old sitting there with little pigtails, a little crayon, a juice box and my crayon and notebook, and I'd always try to remember one word from one of her lectures and its fancy definition afterwards. But she's always, she was heavily involved with our local science fair committee and has been the chair. I promise judging is entirely independent and everything. And believe it or not, 9-year-old me was actually very quiet. I wouldn't say quite social anxiety, but people scared me a lot. And so believe it or not, until about grade 7, when I went to participate in the legislative page program and also started to slowly find people like me, I wouldn't be talking the way I am now. But she's like, come on, go to science fair. You gotta do it. It'll be fun. You'll learn things. And especially in Ontario, our education system does not allow for curiosity or creativity. As you're going to memorize these terms and you're going to do this experiment, but we're already going to tell you how it should be produced. And you must follow these steps and underline it with this pen. And before you even do the experiment, we're going to tell you the results. And when you think of our major scientists, Banting and Best, Marie Curie, there was no precedence before they did their research. It was just pure curiosity and creativity that went and changed the world. And that's really what I see science fair as. And that's what my mom encouraged me to do. She knew I was curious. She knew I liked to help people. She's like, you can combine those together and you can find your own solutions and help people through doing this. So it was really her who kind of pushed me off into the science fair. And of course you do it once and then you're like, oh my goodness, this is wonderful. And so you keep coming back and you keep coming back. And of course it was in grade 8 when I actually got to go to the national fair. I got a lot more influence from some of the friends and people I made because they were just as passionate as I was about it. And so like, at school, for example, we could never tell each other what our projects are. It's the unspoken science fair rule. No one finds out what you're doing till the day of the fair, but we'd all kind of tease each other and, oh, make sure you're working on your logbook and don't forget to do your research tonight. And it was kind of finding that little pod. And not only were they just interested in science, but the fact that they were interested in it through a social justice lens. I feel like once it was kind of, I guess, more like, you know, as you grow up, your friends slowly start to influence you a lot more. I felt a bit of that, but I would definitely say the major influence was my mom in science. And especially my dad also in the limnology and water field. Sometimes he'd bring back little jars of water with just little different zooplankton and algae species. And I'd go and I'd try to identify them and things. And I definitely would say that. Absolutely. So being in a grade 12 student in my final semester, most grade 12 students don't actually do science fair as it's so demanding because it takes a while to do the research. So I am officially retired from Canadian science fairs. I am planning to represent Team Canada at ISAF, so the International Science and Engineering Fair hosted by Regeneron in the United States of America. This year, the host city is Dallas, Texas, so that will be in May. And I think I've found my area of interest. There's so many other things in the field of limnology that I'd love to learn more about. So I would definitely love to continue my research, especially at university, if I could work with an experimental lakes area or pond site to actually get this innovation approved so that we can save Lake Erie and other freshwater ecosystems and prevent harmful algae blooms. I'm also very interested in the field of genetics, especially after learning all about the different genotypes and genome sequencing and things from my project. Believe it or not, it was actually a quote I found. I was 9 or 10, and it's Albert Einstein's, "The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who sit around and watch it happen." Might be paraphrasing a little bit there. But essentially, I am still not fully sure why, but I've always firmly believed that if you have the power to help others and make the world a better place each and every day, and you have the ability to do so, then that is your job to do it. That's sort of kind of that quote is like it's what I hear when I wake up, it's what I hear when I go to bed. And that's sort of my driving force each day. That is an excellent question. I think for me, a lot of it is my extracurricular activities. I have a lot of things that I really enjoy doing. So I play 5 different instruments, and for me, music is a wonderful way to kind of calm down, relax, while also trying new things and challenging your brain. Another thing is I play curling. It's one of my favorite sports. So being able to play a sport with lots of friends, that's a wonderful thing as well. I participate in Reach for the Top, which is a trivia team, math club, debate club. So it's having like a variety of things to do. But I know it kind of sounds weird, but for me, it's how I stay grounded by this variety. I would also say it's having a very strong support system. So of course I have my family who are all loving and wonderful. And of course I have my friends who I can go to at any time. Absolutely. One thing you might have picked up is I'm a very perfectionist type person and personality. So little mistakes for me are kind of a big deal, and it's something I struggle with. When I first wanted to research cyanotoxins and harmful algae blooms, I initially had this plan to develop this sort of garden system that could be employed on lakes to help reduce and pull out nutrients. However, when I first did that experiment, there were some major miscalculations, and plants had nutrient burning, and algae was growing out of control, and there was diatom contamination. And while I had to scrap the entire 4-week research project, and I had to go back to the drawing board. And that really taught, it was actually through that project where I learned, okay, what else can I do? And it's kind of through analyzing your mistakes in the process that you can realize good things happen, because it's from there that I discovered the zooplankton project. So I think it's learning to understand that mistakes and learning to view mistakes as a positive thing, moreover than a negative thing, is I think something really good that we can do to train our brains, because then we can look for new opportunities and pathways from there. Regarding loneliness, that was something huge for me throughout elementary school. And actually, it was a quote my dad would always tell me. You'll find your people one day. It might not be a lot of people, but they'll be your people. And that is something for me that has always stuck with me. And I remember doing the legislative page program in grade 7, I started to find my people. And that you'll learn I'm also very, very interested in politics. And so I stood on my local youth advisory board. I was a member for a year on the Ontario Youth Environment Council. And actually, even from that, I was often the only female in the room. And sometimes I think we all have to understand that that will happen. We're slowly making progress, but I think it's understanding that we need to be comfortable and okay with being ourselves and not being afraid or trying to shun ourselves. It's, I should look up this quote here. It's one that I always love. It is, oh my goodness. We'll continue with the interview. I'll see if I can remember it. But it's, I think, allowing ourselves to be ourselves and not dimming our light just because we're surrounded by men is, I think that's something very important. And it's making sure that you have solid female relationships and mentors and positive advisors. I think that's really important as well to gain and grow in your confidence. Yes, so I was 10 years old when the Ontario curriculum covers civics. And again, I remember learning about this political process. Again, back then it was entirely viewed through a golden lens and rose-colored glasses. But from when I learned about it, I understood that this was a system to bring about social justice and help those who are facing inequalities. And I thought it was just incredible that we had this entire system where you could have a job and you could just work to represent people and their needs and bring about good. Now, I've slowly learned that that's not exactly how it always happens. But it was in grade 7 when I actually went, and there's a program for the Legislative Assembly of Ontario where you can move to Toronto for a period of time if you're selected to participate in the PAGE program, where you actually get to work at our provincial legislature, and you get to be a fly on the wall, and you can see laws and bills and motions passed in the entire parliamentary process. And I'm not sure if it's coming from a really small town and just falling in love with the hustle and bustle of Toronto, or being one of the first times I felt like I belonged because I was surrounded by other children my age who were just as passionate and curious and loved learning and reading as much as I did. But I did love Queen's Park. I just thought it was incredible. And I've enjoyed a lot of my youth, like advisory board positions and meetings. And I find it wonderful to be able to discuss and debate policy and analyze things. So I could definitely see myself entering politics one day. It's just timing and things, and we'll see. I think I was once told the quote as well: fear's two meanings, forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. The choice is yours. I definitely think it's about not being afraid to stand up and say, hey, there's an injustice or there's a problem, we should do something, or making sure to go out of your way to ask that question or research and learn as much as possible. I definitely think my advice would research. For example, when I do a science fair project, I spend a minimum of 4 months gaining background knowledge and background research so you can better understand a topic, because through knowledge and understanding, you can find better solutions and problem solve better. So I think my advice would definitely be to research and learn and keep asking questions and never stop asking questions, because once you have your curiosity, you're golden. And when you see a problem or injustice, do not be afraid to stand up or to reach out or do what you can within your ability to help someone else. Listen, there are so many different voices and views and perspectives. Listen, and listen openly and honestly to learn and understand. Don't come in with any perspectives or pre-made assumptions. Sit and listen, especially to women, our minority groups, especially our youth. Our youth are bright and wonderful. If anything that I learned from the Stockholm Junior Water Prize and the European Union Contest for Young Scientists, the best parts of both of those events were the wonderful youth and friends I made who are just as passionate about changing the world and have these wonderful ideas. We just need an outlet to listen and to make that happen.